commitment and compassion.
A desire to help people and to want to help people, and he cares.
He's very positive, very optimistic.
He's a very genuine person, very forthright. What you see is what you get, and what you see is wonderful. He's just a good man.
Gary was an only child, grew up in the south side of Chicago.
His folks were very warm, open-hearted, open-door policy, so to speak. We had a ton of parties in Gary's basement growing up in grammar school.
Their home was one that consistently welcomed in others, and that was probably very telling for how Dad would lead his life.
He had tons of friends. Everybody liked him. And he had a very calm, easygoing way about him, very friendly. He was also tall and I thought very good looking.
Maury was always very tolerant of Gary's friendships at college. It wasn't easy to be a female in that particular circle because we went to an all-guys school.
Xavier University is in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a Jesuit organization, kind of following path from Brother Rice, which was the Christian Brothers of Ireland. So we just went from the Christian Brothers of Ireland to the Jesuits.
And Gary, of course, was like the leader of the pack, even in freshman year. Again, getting very involved from day one. Gary was always a volunteer, let me help you do this, let me help you do that.
And then Gary graduated from graduate school in January, and he came back to Cleveland to visit me and to meet my parents. And the rest is history.
My brother and I talked Gary into coming into the business at Payne Weber. Gary was teaching at the time, and he gave up his teaching profession and joined Payne Weber. My brother Bob, myself, and Gary Personette left Payne Weber and went to H.B. Shane and Company.
H.B. Shane and Company was a Midwest regional firm out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. They were young, they were excited, they were taking on something new, they were going to be running this. It was their own little shop.
About a year later, Gary moved to Blunt Ellis as a broker. 2 years later, Gary convinced us to move to Blunt Ellis and Lowy, and at that time we moved the entire office.
We want to welcome you all to another edition of Meet the Pressure. We're talking now with Gary Personette, a regional sales manager with our firm. Isn't it true that in order to scratch out a living, you turn to the degrading habit of selling your hair? I will admit that your hair is really quite beautiful.
Gary was looking for another opportunity, and he saw an opportunity to go with the firm and to come out to the northwest suburbs to open up an office.
From there, we started in the Chicago office, went to Schaumburg, the Woodfield office, and then from there we went to Barrington.
We were just starting a small little office in Barrington, Illinois.
Gary was the manager of the Barrington office, and then he totally went out of management, went back into sales, and Mark Lefevre became the manager of the Barrington office.
He had to let go of his book to become regional manager, and those were the days when Julie was his right-hand man, and Marcia took over Gary's first book.
So he thought that was a natural progression, that he should go into management. And I think sometimes then after a while you're in management, you realize that maybe you had more fun in sales.
He really missed the one-on-one with the clientele and had an opportunity to come back and be a manager in Barrington, and he grabbed it and ran with it.
And then we ended up taking over Marcia's book, so we got all the clients all back together again for one big happy book.
We just kind of stuck together. Gary, myself, Bob, Paul, the whole group of us.
They share the funniest memories and stories and have been lifelong friends, and still to this day get together and go golfing.
We just came back from 16 of us met in Williamsburg, Virginia for 4 days of golf.
Although none of us allow him to drive a cart, because God knows where we'd end up if we did that.
He's put a lot of hard work into his business, but he's also put a lot of hard work into his life and his family and his friends.
Gary's always put aside his personal or even things he had to do for work if the kids needed something first.
Gary's always been a very committed father and very committed to his kids, and each one of his kids has been very unique.
He was an amazing father, involved in coaching, from soccer games to going to dance practices, and he was always very supportive.
He always wore his heart on his sleeve for David, Sarah, and I. I think I know now more than my brother and sister knew of how many sacrifices my parents made.
Well, John coming into Gary's practice was a great thing for Gary. I mean, it instilled this new life, in Gary. You can see a lot, of Gary in John.
One's the apple and one's the tree, It's uncanny.
Talk about a clone of the old man, He sounds just like him.
Gary's dedication to John over the years has really paid off. John went through some rough times, and Gary stuck with him.
And as it stands right now, Gary is as proud as all get out about, he knew John was going to be good, but he never realized how wonderful that John had learned and grown and then took it, as a young person can take it another step further.
Gary was always the first to volunteer.
So given the time, it was really Rotary that he more or less zeroed in on.
Rotary, of course, helps local organizations, but Rotary International does a lot of work with students and student exchanges where students come from other countries to this country and vice versa.
The basis of Rotary is that it's local business people, and they try to represent each business within the community with a member in the club.
It's funny, I make the joke that there's so many Rotarians in my office, I don't know who's not a Rotarian anymore.
As couples, they would do special things at Christmas for other people that didn't have. So they have a very high standing in the community.
Gary's knowledge of finances as well as passion to make an organization prosper like Wellness Place is something that Gary does very well. The mission of Wellness Place is to help those who are going through cancer, patients, families, children, and it's an organization that does these services all free of charge.
He does spend a lot of time giving back, and he's always done that. He's done that with his church, he's done that with the schools, he's done that with his kids.
We were probably one of the first two people to buy what was then called an IBM PC Junior. Now, I don't know how many people remember that because, it was a lot of years ago. But it was kind of funny because it was probably a month or two after that we were meeting that I finally realized that Gary didn't know how to turn his on.
One day I caught Gary yelling into his computer, John, are you there? I watched him for about 5 minutes, maybe it seemed like 5 minutes, 3 minutes. John, finally I'm like, what are you doing? He's not in the computer.
It's always been fun to go to work, that we just enjoy what we do, and every day I think we laugh and we have a good time, we get our work done. And Gary's always tried to make work like a little family.
When you come into work, you almost don't feel like he's a boss. You almost feel like it's like, hey, Dad, and it's just a real family feel.
What makes Gary successful in the business is that he's genuine, that people feel very comfortable with him, that he sits and listens to his clients.
That's what Gary's all about. To service the client, to do what's best for the client.
Gary's always put the client first. He'll back out of a deal before he'll force his way into one if he cannot service that client.
Understanding who that person is as an individual and wanting them to grow in their future the same way he wants his own family to grow in our future.
Gary's a feely, touchy kind of guy, as you may or may not know, and his clients love it.
His strength was putting his arms around relationships, okay? Whether that's in the community, whether it was in the business, whether it was anywhere else.
He takes a personal interest in us, not only as clients, but as friends and as people.
I think that's why he's a good salesman. He listens and he listens to the needs of others.
And I'll tell you, my father shines every single day that he's sitting with somebody that is looking for help through him because they trust him, they love him, and they respect him.
They would say, aren't you lucky to be working with Gary? And my answer always is, yeah, he's a great guy.